Hello guys, so just me today. Dr. Roblard might join us later, but let's continue with our review of Coriolanus now. We'll begin with the prayer as usual. Come, Holy Spirit, divine creator, true source of light and fountain of wisdom, pour forth your brilliance upon my dense intellect. Dissipate the darkness which covers me, that of sin and of ignorance. Grant me a penetrating mind to understand, a retentive memory, method and ease in learning, the lucidity to comprehend, and abundant grace in expressing myself. Guide the beginning of my work, direct its progress, and bring it to successful completion. This I ask through Jesus Christ, true God and true man, living and reigning with you and the Father, forever and ever. Amen. So, in the first lesson on this play, we noted some basic points about the plot, and we also talked a little bit about why the play is interesting. And essentially, we're looking at how we deal with the warrior in civil society. Dr. Roblard was saying that this is a problem that we face now still. It's not something that was confined to ancient Rome. It applies to all places, all times. What do you do with your returning warriors? So this critic's comment that the title character grows in self-awareness but is destroyed by a world in which he can no longer function is why we are interested in this. And we see Shakespeare as a political philosopher engaged in the same kind of questions that philosophers proper engage in, except he's doing it through the concrete medium of characters and plot, rather than just abstract questions. And for many people, this kind of concrete engagement with the problem gives a more vivid experience of it. So it's one of the best ways to learn to think about some of the fundamental problems facing individuals and therefore society. Remember, we looked at the different social circles of the play as well, for people who missed the first lesson. We're concerned with, most of all, the protagonist, Coriolanus here, in the middle of the Roman circle, and his antagonist, Phidias, in the Volsces here. That pair, the opposing generals, is where most of the questions concerning what it means to be a man, what honor is, what valor is, that pair is what those questions revolve around. We're also thinking about the role of the politicians too. And last week, Mike was making some good points about how the warriors don't feel appreciated by the politicians. And they know that without them, so without the warriors, the politicians don't have any kind of safe space to operate within. So we were saying that the blood of the warrior creates the safe space within which all other activities flourish. Without the heroic virtues, no higher virtues are possible. And one of the problems with this is that it can give rise to the Achilles-Agamemnon dilemma. And our starting point from last lesson really was that with this play, we are looking, as the critic Ruben Brower put it, at the problem of Achilles in Rome. What would happen if you take someone with the mindset of an Achilles and put him into domestic politics? Mike said, what if we took General Patton, for example? Similar idea. So we established last time that these were the main themes, and now we'll have a look again at some of the ways in which these come out through the most important speeches. Remember that from Plutarch's life of Coriolanus, he said that yes, he's a great warrior, and yet he was totally clueless that when he lost his temper, It was the weakness of his nature that broke out in these ulcerations of anger. Remember the distinction between masculinity and machismo. So the meek man is able to control himself. He marshals his anger. He's not overwhelmed by it. Whereas the weak man, as we see Marcius in many scenes losing his temper, the weak man can't do that. So that's the real distinction we want to think about. Anger as something in itself is neutral. It's just a prompt to get us to fix something. It tells us what's wrong. It makes us act. But you have to use it rather than lose it. You have to respond appropriately, not irrationally, whether in the manner of it, the measure of it, or regarding what the matter is as well, what makes you angry. So we're going to see him lose his temper in all kinds of ways. And Shakespeare's taken his cue here from Plutarch's life of Coriolanus, which describes him as having an imperious temper, haughty and overbearing. When he's first introduced to us, Menenius has a long speech. And there are lots of things in this that I want to draw your attention to. So this is Act 2, Scene 2, if you want to follow along in your copy. The deeds of Coriolanus should not be uttered feebly. It is held that valor is the chiefest virtue, and most dignifies the haver. If it be, the man I speak of cannot in the world be singly counterpoised. So valor there is to do with military bravery. This is the thing that the Roman man is most valued for. So in Coriolanus, they're looking at the apex of what it means to be a man. Hence, he cannot be singly counterpoised, which means that he has no equal. And the man I speak of is an echo of Virgil's line in the Aeneid that he's going to sing of arms and the man. With the opening line as well about the deeds of Coriolanus, we have an echo of Homer's The Glorious Deeds of Great Heroes Dead. Now, Mike and I were just touching on the beginning of this speech last time, saying that what we have here is a placing of Coriolanus within the classical tradition of the epic heroes. Remember, Achilles in Rome, what would that look like? Well, something like this, as we're about to see. At 16 years, when Tarquin made a head for Rome, he fought beyond the mark of others. Our then dictator, whom with all praise I point at, saw him fight, when with his Amazonian chin he drove the bristled lips before him. So 16 was a bit younger than boys were normally allowed to go to war, showing that he is precocious and has been allowed to start earlier. We've also got the fact that despite having an Amazonian chin, so no facial hair, the Amazons were the mythical warrior women, just mythical. Despite having the Amazonian chin, he manages to drive back fully bearded men. So this is an extraordinary youth that's being described here. He bestrid an oppressed Roman and, in the council's view, slew 3 opposers. One teenage boy killing 3 grown men. He's destined for greatness as a warrior. That's the whole point of the speech. If you've got any questions about this as we're going through, let me know. Mike might be joining us later. Tarquin's self he met and struck him on his knee in that day's feats when he might act the woman in the scene. He proved best man in the field, and for his meed was brow bound with the oak. So this is the laurel that he wins for his valor on the battlefield. Note how we're told that he might have acted the woman, only being a young boy. Perhaps he would have been overwhelmed by his first battle, but no. In fact, he was the best man there. Now here's the important bit. His pupil age, man entered, thus he waxed like a sea. So the idea that at age 16, when he sees battle for the first time, when he's blooded. That is when he's initiated into manhood. So for him then, what we get is that what it means to be a man and what it means to be a warrior are basically the same thing. His first battle was when he crosses the threshold into manhood. People are often wondering nowadays what's happened to the masculine rite of passage. A universal thing across human history, and always to do with testing courage and the ability to endure pain and sacrifice yourself in preparation for combat. Do we have it anymore? No, not really. Do people feel confused because of that? Do they sometimes lack a sense of identity? Yes. What we've got here is a very clear one. Man entered after his first battle. And then he waxes like a sea. Why like a sea? Because it's a force of nature. We'll see in a minute some of the other imagery describing him. It's like he's unstoppable. And in the brunt of 17 battles since, he lurched all swords of the garland. So in all the battles that he's fought, he has been the best fighter. He's always won the garland, the laurels. For this last, before and in Corioli, let me say I cannot speak him home. So this is the most impressive yet. Marcius, because of his victory at Coriolis, has now got the honorary title Coriolanus, after the name of the city that he has captured. And this is what the Romans called a triumph. So when you come back, the procession through the streets, and also what he's about to have now, Menenius is introducing him as he walks into the room to receive the award. This is the most that a warrior can hope for. He stopped the flyers, that means the men who are running away, and by his rare example made the coward turn terror into sport. As weeds before a vessel under sail, so men obeyed and fell below his stem. His sword, death's stamp, where it did mark, it took. From face to foot, he was a thing of blood. Some ominous undertones here. It reminds me of Macbeth when we first meet him, covered in blood, and he unseams from the nave to the chaps, so from the belly button to the throat, the tyrant MacDonald. And although he's covered in blood as a badge of honour, it also foreshadows the way in which he's going to turn into the bloody butcher by the end of the play, not defending the king but killing him. And Marcius here, described as having a sword which is death's stamp and being a thing of blood, we also have warning signs about what he has the potential to turn into. This is a really important point. I'm going to show you some clips from Mike Tyson talking about his experience of fighting shortly, because one of the things this play does so well is it shows you that the pros of men can also be the cons, right? It's a really important point. The pros are also the cons. So what does it mean to be a great warrior like this? Kind of what it means to be a guard dog or a fighting dog, something like that. So you've got these traits that mean you are good at what you are bred for, what your purpose is, and yet the same ones in different circumstances can also be problematic. So let's say you're really determined and fiery, for example. Great, warriors need that. But those same things can also be a downside too. So the pros are the cons. He was a thing of blood whose every motion was timed with dying cries. Alone he entered the mortal gate of the city, which he painted with shunless destiny. Aidless came off, and with a sudden reinforcement struck Corioli like a planet. So he was waxing like a sea before, and now he's described as striking Corioli like a planet. So the images, again, drawn from nature, suggesting the immensity and how he is inexorable. There's no stopping this force. Note how he's also doing it alone and aidless. Now, this is partly to do with his pride, because essentially he doesn't need anyone's help. And this hubris is going to later be his nemesis, his downfall, because he disconnects himself from Rome and from the people he depends on to be honoured in the first place, and is even willing to turn against them. Now all's his, when by and by the din of war gan pierce his ready sense. Then straight his doubled spirit re-quickened what in flesh was fatigate. And to the battle came he, where he did run reeking o'er the lives of men, as if 'twere a perpetual spoil. And till we called both field and city ours, he never stood to ease his breast with panting. The warrior par excellence then doesn't even seem to get tired. He re-quickens what in flesh was fatigate. So you're looking at him in his element. Now, after this, we get the comment, worthy man. He cannot but with measure fit the honours which we devise him. Let's have a look at this battle scene now. Any questions so far? Let me know. Ivor the Boneless became a member. Thanks, Ivan. Appreciate it. So, this clip I'm about to show you now is from the Battle of Corioli. It looks like it's going to mute my mic when I show you this screen, so we'll just watch it through. I'll talk afterwards.
Who's yonder that does appear as you were flayed?
Oh, gods. Here's the stamp of Marcius.
Come I too late? Come I too late?
Aye, if you come not in the blood of others, but mantled in your own.
Let me hold you in arms as sound as when I wooed, in heart as merry as when our nuptial day was done. There is the man of my soul's hate, Phidias piercing our Romans.
Worthy sir, thou bleeds. Thy exercise has been too violent for a second course of fight.
Sir, praise me not, my work has not yet warmed me. The blood I drop is more medicinal than dangerous to me. To Phidias thus I will appear and fight. If any such be here, as it was sin to doubt, that love this painting wherein you see me smeared, if any fear lesser his person than an ill report, if any think brave death outweighs bad life, and that his country is dearer than himself, let him alone. Or so many so minded wave thus to express his disposition, and follow Marcius. Oh. Me alone. Make you a sword of me!
Okay, couple of things there. So the first thing is that when they were worried to see the blood, he said it's medicinal. So the idea is that war actually heals or strengthens him. And when he was challenging them, who's with me? Initially, they weren't, but then, just like you get with somebody like Alexander the Great, who stripped naked to show his troops that he had no scars on the back of his body because he'd never fled from danger. His example inspires them to go with him. So that line, make you a sword of me, shows us that this is what his identity consists in. It's what he's been trained for since age 16. And that speech about his achievements at Corioli, his sword death's stamp, and how he became a thing of blood, that's how he sees himself. So he sees himself as the sword of Rome. So after this then, when the people disrespect him and he thinks they're not grateful enough, this is the speech he gives when he is banished.
You! Common cry of curse, whose hate as reeks of the rotten fens, whose loves I prize as the dead carcasses of unburied men that do corrupt my air. I banish you, and here remain with your uncertainty. Let every feeble rumour shake your hearts, your enemies with nodding of their caps fan you into despair. Have the power still to banish your defenders, till at length your ignorance, which finds not till it feels, making but reservation of yourselves, still your own foes, deliver you as most abated captives to some nation that won you without blows. Despising for you the city. Thus, I turn my back. There is a world elsewhere.
The people's enemy is gone!
Now, what's interesting about this then? Let's think about the language that he uses. We've got a common cry of curs. A cur is just like a mongrel dog. So we can see what his view of the people is there. He's proud and he disdains them. He says that his breath, their breath, he hates as reek of the rotten fens. So it stinks to him even to share the same air as they breathe. And the most important bit is that he prizes their loves as the dead carcasses of unburied men that do corrupt my air. So he depends on being honored by them. And his role as a warrior is supposed to be defending them and upholding Roman society. And yet it's meaningless. So look at the tension between the two things. They are the ones who confer status on him, and he's serving them in his military duties, and yet doesn't mean anything to him. In fact, when they banish him, he instead says, I banish you. And what does it mean for him to leave the city like this? Well, Aristotle's got a interesting remark about this, saying that the man who would live outside the city must be either a beast or a god, because man is the rational animal and therefore social, made for society. But Marcius, when he's confronted by these people who disrespect him and accuse him of wanting to become a tyrant with his new political position, he is willing at this point to walk away and say there's a world elsewhere. Well, later on, he talks about being like a dragon, a lonely dragon going to its den. So that's an echo of Aristotle's beast imagery for the man outside the city. But given what we've seen earlier about him being a kind of god of war, then the pride means he has got this idea that he doesn't need them. So he can go it alone. He ends up as a beast. He's compared to a dragon, compared to a tiger. But the streak of the god is there too. And what does it mean? What does it mean when he says, oh, the stream dropped off, it's back on? Good. So what does it mean when he warns them that without him, they will have the power still to banish your defenders, till at length your ignorance, which finds not till it feels, making not reservation of yourselves, still your own foes, deliver you as most abated captives to some nation that won you without blows. Well, without him, they will be defenseless. In fact, conquered without blows, meaning without the warrior like him to stand between them and their enemies, then the enemies can just walk straight in and conquer them. So he's confident in disdaining them because without them, without him, what are they? But the really interesting thing for the play actually turns out to be, without them, what is he? We'll come back to that one later. So next thing is then, he has described himself as dangerous physic. What he offers is like a tough fix for the problems that Rome is facing. And he's frustrated with the politicians who don't see what they need to do, who don't see that the people need to be ruled with a very firm hand. He says, you that will be less fearful than discreet, that love the fundamental part of state more than you doubt the change on it, that prefer a noble life before a long, and wish to jump a body with a dangerous physic that's sure of death. Without it, at once pluck out the multitudinous tongue. So the point here is that they are having problems with the rabble. There's been riots. The multitudinous tongue, in his view, needs to be plucked out because it is threatening Rome. Hence, a man like him represents the dangerous physic that is needed. But Sicinius, one of the politicians, says that Coriolanus himself is a disease that must be cut away. So the man who says that he is the dangerous physic, the thing you need to use, otherwise Rome's going to die, Sicinius says no, he himself is the disease. And that's what's led to the banishment that we've just seen there. Now, why is this? Because he won't compromise. Menenius is clear on this. He wants to compromise, but Coriolanus just won't. Any questions, let me know. And this is the reason. His nature is too noble for the world. He would not flatter Neptune for his trident, or Jove for his power to thunder. His heart's his mouth. What his breast forges, that his tongue must vent. And being angry, does forget that ever he heard the name of death. Too noble for the world, then, turns out to be a flaw for him because of his inability to compromise. Now, perhaps this has something going for it on the battlefield, but here, in the domestic situation, where he's out of his comfort zone and different skills are being tested, it becomes his downfall. He cannot understand why his mother has asked him to tone things down a bit. He says to her, "Why did you wish me milder? Rather say I play the man I am." He says he doesn't want to be false to his nature. So this is the picture then of a man who cannot adapt to what the demands of the different situations are. If he were to curb his nature, if he were to rein things in, then this is how it would make him feel. Away my disposition, and possess me some harlot's spirit. My throat of war be turned, which quired with my drum, into a pipe small as a eunuch. So the image there is that if he were to do what his mother's asking, then his throat of war would turn into the pipe small as a eunuch. In other words, it would be emasculating. So no compromise is possible for him, and this is what makes him difficult for the others to deal with, and why they say that he is the disease that must be cut away. I will not do it, lest I cease to honour mine own truth, and by my body's action teach my mind a most inherent baseness. So this, on one level, is integrity, but we also want to think about the possibility of inflexibility and pride too. Ophidius, his enemy has a great insight into him. He understands him well. He says, whether nature not to be other than one thing, not moving from the cask to the cushion, but commanding peace, even with the same austerity and garb as he controlled the war. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the problem. He can't move from the cask to the cushion. He treats peace in the same way, with the same austerity and garb, as he controlled the war. So this is the Achilles in Rome dilemma. After he's exiled and joins forces with Phidias, then he becomes more similar to Achilles. And this is the famous point about the wrath of Achilles, and he shares it, and there's an irrationality to it. So Cominius, when he goes to try and reason with him, look, do you really want to attack Rome? Surely there's a way we can talk through this. Says, yet one time he did call me by my name. I urged our old acquaintance and the drops that we have bled together. Look, Marcius, I fought with you. We bled together. Surely you remember? No. Coriolanus he would not answer to. Forbade all names. He was a kind of nothing, titleless, till he had forged himself a name of the fire of burning Rome. Now this idea that he's been reduced to nothing and only the flames of Rome can help him forge a new identity reminds us of when we first heard about how he was man-entered in his first battle. So combat and the forging of his character go together. And Mike and I were talking about the idea of archetypes last time. And I want to share a clip with you now from Mike Tyson talking about what fighting meant to him. And this idea of forging yourself a name in fire and being titleless until you do is what Mike's talking about. Clip coming up now. Right, here we go.
It wasn't my punching power, it was the accuracy. I'm precise and hitting you here. I mean, everywhere I hit you is a reason, and normally I get the right results. And not only do I have to do it, I have to do it spectacularly for more people to want to see me do it again. The more I hurt them, the more spectacularly I hurt them, the better my life would be. And that's how my mindset was. Cus loves hurting people, other fighters. He loves breaking their ribs, their eye sockets, their cheekbone. He just loves, he just wanted to see how people work under those circumstances. He made me believe I was the best fighter the world has ever produced. He just made me feel something. He made me feel like something I never felt before. You know, a lot of his fighters left him because he's so overbearing. He's so perfected. And if you're allowed to stay, you have to be crazy too to be with this man. Because I wanted to be the best so bad. And only he could do it. No one could inspire me like him. I'm one of those guys. I'm a dark person. I come from a dark world. So nobody, especially a white motherfucker, no one could inspire me like him. He inspired me to be better than what I was. There's no way I was going to be. If I was Mike Tyson, badass motherfucker from Brownsville, Brooklyn, I still wouldn't have made it. You know, I changed my lifestyle. I stopped getting high, I stopped drinking, I stopped everything. I stopped fucking girls. Matter of fact, I never had no girl when I was boxing. That's all I focused on. That's why I didn't want anything. I just wanted to fight. All I did was watch fights all day. That's all I did because that's all I wanted to be. That's all I knew. I knew all the etiquette about fighting, everything. Anything you asked me about fighting, I could tell you. The most successful people that ever lived in history are megalomaniacs, but they got a low self-esteem. They don't think much about themselves, but they think they're God on the other hand too. Anytime you want to be the best in the world at anything, there's going to be disappointment. It's almost like you almost have to give your happiness up to accomplish your goal. Every time I hurt somebody and knock them out, my life gets better. And so I love hurting people now. Because my life is getting better and I'm getting the fucking girl, I'm getting the mansion, I'm getting the planes, I'm getting the boats, I'm getting whatever I want, so hurting is beautiful.
All right, so connection you might not have been expecting when we started the lesson, but what a great explanation of what it means to be titleless until you've forged yourself a name in fire. And it was interesting how, not that most people would think of Tyson as a Shakespeare critic, but he had a good insight there into how some of the greatest people in the world also have a mixture of low self-esteem and megalomania. And that is a pretty good description of what Marcius Coriolanus is like at times, because he's reduced to nothing now without Rome, and yet he also sees himself as better than it and marching on it for vengeance. Titleless until forged in fire. Now, what does it mean to be a kind of nothing? Well, it means dissolving bonds with your family and with your nation. Even your mother and your father figure. So Menenius, when he goes to visit Coriolanus, after Cominius has failed to talk sense into him, Menenius goes thinking maybe he'll listen to me. And then Coriolanus just says, away! Menenius cannot believe this. How away? Wife, mother, child? I know not. All bond and privilege of nature break. Let it be virtuous to be obstinate. Let the Volscis plough Rome and harrow Italy. I'll never be such a gosling to obey instinct, but stand as if a man were author of himself and knew no other kin. In this moment then, when he says that as if a man knew no author other than himself, what does that mean he is? Well, this is a description of the traditional definition of God. Uncaused, necessary being with no author, not dependent on anything. So that's why I like the point that Tyson made about megalomania, because rejecting his father figure, rejecting his mother as well, as if he has no kin, and also saying, fine, let the Volscis plough my nation. I have no kind of duty to it, no bond. So why is the military an honourable profession? Why did he have the status from before? Service to his country. Take that all away, and what's left of it? He's got the talent still. He's the same gifted warrior, except he's not really serving anything except his own rage at this point. So this is like with Achilles versus Hector. Hector is the greater man because what he does is in service of his community, whereas Achilles is impetulant and loses his temper, goes too far. Similar idea. So Cominius has failed. Menenius has failed. Who's left to try? His mother. His mother. She chastens him, saying she cannot bear to see him making the mother, wife and child, to see the son, the husband and the father tearing his country's bowels out. She says, thou shalt no sooner march to assault thy country than to tread, trust to it thou shalt not, on thy mother's womb that brought thee to this world. So the link there is between the mother's womb and the nation, which etymologically is to do with natality, birth. So this is the thing that snaps him out of it. Got a couple of questions. Doesn't he only try to please mum? He wants to be a warrior because of his upbringing from mum. The 2 times he is not valiant were because mum told him to. Well, this is the criticism that Ophidius is going to make of him later. And his mother, because of what being a man means to her, is very Spartan in her attitude. So the mothers and the wives of the Spartans said that they'd rather that the men come back on the shields dead than defeated. So her view of manhood is very militaristic. And remember, he's gone into battle at 16, younger than he was supposed to. She was keen for him to do this. She's been proud of his accomplishments as well. So in a sense, trying to please his mother is also trying to fulfill the same masculine ideal that he thinks he's now living up to. But yes, Ophidius is going to make the point that he is a mummy's boy. But what they are realizing in this scene here is that he does have duties. He does have natural law duties to his family and to his country. So it is natural for him to behave in this way and compromise. And Ophidius, later on, when he criticizes him for this, is acting unfairly. When Coriolanus laughs, thinking that the gods are going to think this is an unnatural scene when he finally yields to his mother, that shows how far gone he is, because in fact there's nothing more natural than what he's doing, saying he's going to spare his own family. Now the next thing I want to look at is another clip here.
He whined and roared away your victory.
Hearest thou, Mars?
Name not the god, the boy of tears.
Measureless liar, thou hast made my heart too great for what contains it. Boy! O slave! Cut me to pieces, Volskis! Men and lads! Stain all your edges on me! Boy! If you have writ your annals true, 'tis there that like an eagle in a dovecot, I fluttered your Volscians in Coriolis. Alone I did it. Boy!
Then they kill him. Revealing lines. Oh, it gets suspended if I show too much from the film, does it? Oh, that's a pain. Anyway, I don't know how much of it you saw, but what's happening there is that he has been offended by the way that Ophidius has spoken about him. He notices that Ophidius calls him Marcius. So he says, Marcius? Like, why aren't you honoring me with my full name, my honorary name, Coriolanus? And Marcius says, dost thou think I'll grace thee with that robbery, thy stolen name, Coriolanus in Corioli? And then makes the point that he has betrayed the Volscians because for certain drops of salt, just the tears, he has given up what he promised to them. So he's given Rome back to the Romans. Why do they think this is betrayal? Because he swore it to them. And what is his word worth now as a man? Well, to Ophidius, he says it's just like a twist of rotten silk. That fragile. The man's word, his honor, is worth nothing. Now, when he's listening to this, Coriolanus then says, hearest thou, Mars? So he's appealing to the god of war, saying, you know what I am like, and this way they're talking about me is unfair. And then Ophidius comes back to that, name not the god thou boy of tears. And that word boy is the one that really sets Coriolanus off. He repeats it himself a few times and then saying, remember, like an eagle in a dovecot, I fluttered your Volscians in Corioli alone. Now that is an echo of the beginning of the play when he was talking about doing things all by himself, and Menenius was praising him for doing that in the speech when he was awarded the title as well. So this is him proving his sense of masculinity through his military accomplishments again. You can't possibly call me a boy when I have done all of this. So next thing is then, hopefully that didn't cut too much of the stream out. Next thing is that we're left with his sense of wounded pride and emasculation because Ophidius is not respecting him as a warrior, and his only way to try to prove himself is by appealing to Mars and the others about why this is wrong. So what do you get when you get that sense of emptiness? Well, the next clip I want to look at here, using Tyson again, if we fast forward this one up.
War. I know all the warriors from Charlemagne, Achilles, the #1 warrior of all warriors. From then Alexander, Napoleon, I know them all. I read them all, I studied them all. I know the art of fight, I know the art of war. That's all I ever studied. That's why I'm so feared. That's why they feared me when I was in the ring, because I was an annihilator. That's all I was born for. Now those days are gone. It's empty. I'm nothing. That's the reason why I'm crying, because I'm not that person no more. And I miss them. Because sometimes I feel like a bitch. Because I don't want that person to come out, because if he comes out, hell is coming with him.
So feeling like he's nothing because he's no longer the warrior that he was before. And he said he was crying because he's not that person. And he's also afraid because if that person comes out again, hell is coming with him. Now that's a similar situation to what we get at the end of the scene here, where Marcius is so incensed because to him, his identity as the warrior, as the man of honor, the man of valor, which is the thing that most dignifies the haver of all things, has been stripped away from him. So he has to come back to that challenge. He thinks it's unfair because what he did with his mother was natural, not unnatural, as Ophidius is accusing him of being. Now, at the end, when the conspirators stab him in the back and Ophidius gets his revenge for the supposed betrayal, Marcius has his last words. Oh, that I had him with 6 Ophidiuses or more, his tribe, to use my lawful sword. Last word in the play is sword. And Ophidius, after he's dead, can't help but respect him and gives him a noble funeral, as a warrior would deserve. So there's an interesting ambiguity at the end of the play, whether Ophidius thinks that what he did really was dishonorable and whether he treated him correctly. In a way, Ophidius is like the opposite of Achilles, dragging Hector around the walls of Troy and desecrating the body, because he does ensure his opponent has a noble funeral and he does respect him. Interesting conclusion then to the play. Who is the greater of the two men? Ophidius says, my rage is gone and I'm struck with sorrow, as if he's done something wrong. And yet, we can't side with Marcius totally either because of all his flaws. So, like all Shakespeare's plays, there's a complexity to it. There isn't a clear cut hero or a villain. But taken together, the two men, like the pairing of Achilles and Hector in the Iliad, show what some of the conflicts involving masculinity and duty to society are. So I hope you enjoyed going through those, and next time we'll have Mike back, and I think the next book is St. Augustine's The City of God. So start reading that one. Books 11 and 12 I think we're doing, and we'll go through book 11 next week. Any final questions for this one? Why did they cut the funeral from the film? Right at the end of that film version, the body's just chucked into the back of a flatbed truck, which I guess is the way of highlighting the indignity of the death. So the sense of the nobility which you get in the play from Ophidious's final speech is undermined. So that's the particular reading that that director would have been going for. I'm not sure whether I agree with that emphasis. I think it's better to have the dignity of the way the play actually concludes, because it makes Ophidius more complex. And it also makes it harder to read Marcius in a simplistic way too, because even his greatest enemy still admires him. All right, guys, thanks a lot for joining in. Last chance for questions. And then I will see you next time for St. Augustine. Let me skim back up, see if I've missed any. Costamato spoke of people having deep roots and he could read them easily by asking about their families. Do you think he disconnected his fighters from these duties to make them harder to read? I don't know enough about what he did with his fighters to know that that's what he did for sure. But if that's true, then that's similar to what Marcius describes about having no bonds, isn't it? That's a really interesting point. Yeah. Last question, I think. All done. Thanks for joining, guys. Take care.